Israel has ordered the mass evacuation of Palestinians from the city of Khan Younis, which hints that a new ground assault there is imminent. For more on the Israel-Hamas war, we're joined by Professor Robert Lawrence. Welcome.
Hello, good. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Professor Lawrence, first off, why Khan Younis again? Why that city?
Okay, well, with no consensus on who's going to rule the Gaza Strip after this war, Israel's military objectives have switched to just limiting or destroying the military capacity and the military infrastructure of Hamas so that a repeat of October 7th doesn't happen. So clearing and holding territory, which is a standard counterinsurgency strategy, doesn't seem to be on the horizon for Israel. I don't think that they want to get bogged down into a long occupation. It's extremely costly, and it makes Israel vulnerable in case there's an expansion of this war. So instead, in kind of in a different way of doing counterinsurgency, Israel seems to be fine attacking personnel, destroying military tunnel infrastructure, withdrawing, and then waiting for Hamas or other axis of resistance fighters to reconstitute themselves, and then attacking again in like a re-clearing mission. So we've seen a pattern of this. It's been observable for the past couple of months. In Jabalia in May, and then in the Shujaila district of Gaza City last week, we saw re-clearing missions happen and fierce fighting. And now we're seeing this happen in Khan Younis. Now, why did this happen in Khan Younis in particular? About 2 days ago, Palestinian Islamic Jihad launched 20 rockets into Israel. Mm-hmm. So immediately after this, they decided to go ahead and do a re-clearing mission again.
So not a too surprise. Now, in the meantime, victims and relatives of victims of the October 7 attack by Hamas have sued countries like Iran, Syria, and North Korea for their alleged Hamas support. Let's talk about that.
Right. So the Anti-Defamation League is a pro-Israel advocacy group that was started in 1913. Mm-hmm. And they have filed a federal lawsuit against those three countries on behalf of 125 people, including U.S. citizens and their family members, who were injured or killed in the October 7th attack. So what this lawsuit is seeking to do is they're trying to use the state sponsor of terrorism exemption to the Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act. So what this does, it rejects immunity from prosecution for states that are designated state sponsors of terrorism. And all three of those countries, plus Cuba, are now currently on this list. So more specifically, the suit alleges that Iran supplied training, financial support, and weapons. Syria provided training and financing, and North Korea supplied weapons and tunnel digging expertise. And the real crux of this is that they're saying that without this support, Hamas could not have carried out the October 7th attacks. Therefore, these countries are complicit in the attacks.
Well, these countries being sued, Iran, Syria, and North Korea, will any of these countries respond to the allegations in a U.S. federal court? Some experts say it's highly unlikely. What do you think?
I would agree with them. I think it's very highly unlikely. There's precedent for this, actually. So, U.S. courts ordered the frozen assets of Iranian assets to be distributed to the victims of the 1983 Marine barracks bombing, mm-hmm. and also the 1996 Khobar Towers bombing in Saudi Arabia. Tehran denies the legitimacy of these rulings and actually fought in the international court to get the assets returned. And actually last year, they kind of, in return, they filed a suit ordering the United States to pay $420 million for an operation that happened in 1980. Likewise, North Korea, the U.S. court ordered North Korea, seized North Korean assets to be distributed to the family of Otto Warmbier, the U.S. college student who passed away after his extended stay in North Korea years back. And North Korea didn't respond to that positively either. So I think it's very unlikely any of these countries are going to take this very seriously.
But still, Professor Lawrence, what happens if the lawsuit actually ends up being successful? I mean, what does that mean?
Okay, so if it's successful, and assuming these countries don't actually pay the compensation awarded by a judge, what they're seeking to do is unlock funds from the U.S. Victims of State-Sponsored Terrorism Fund. So this fund was started by Congress in 2015. It's helped out about 18,000 victims of state-sponsored terrorism. It's funded by the seized assets of states that are on this list. So it's not funded by taxpayers' money at all. So the fund has actually been declining in the past 4 years. The actual funds, the assets in the fund. But last month, a bicameral and bipartisan legislation was introduced into Congress, possibly, maybe probably, thinking that a lawsuit like this was coming down the pipeline.
Well, what's also interesting is that the U.S. is yet to recognize military cooperation between Hamas and North Korea on top of Syria and Iran, whereas South Korea's intel agency has. Why is the U.S. taking a rather careful stance here?
This is a little tricky, to be honest. It's a little bit confusing why the administration is so hesitant to address this. We've seen the administration officials have actually admitted that there are open source evidence, there is open source evidence of North Korean weaponry being used by Hamas, and then in the same exchange with reporters, say that there's no evidence of military cooperation between the two. So there's a lot of mixed signals. Regarding the Biden administration's policy towards North Korea, it's maintained this kind of open invitation for talks with no preconditions since it came into power, and this has largely been ignored by North Korea, and that seems to be the limit of the political will or the initiative to actually engage North Korea. So it's highly likely. It's tough to know exactly what the administration's thinking, but I would argue that probably with multiple areas of the world where tensions are rising, the administration is probably satisfying with just maintaining deterrence through military exercises and continued multilateral initiatives in Asia Pacific without closing any doors or provoking any further global instability, especially during an election year. We have an election in the U.S. in a couple months. So I think that's probably the most likely reason.
All right, Professor Lawrence, thank you so much for your insight this morning. You have a wonderful day.
Thank you, you too. Thank you for having me.